Our brains are constantly asking three questions. Am I safe? Do I trust you? Do I matter to you? Every human being is asking that question every microsecond. We are constantly scanning for threats in the environment. This is our inheritance from millions of years of evolution. When the answer is no to any of those questions, the prefrontal cortex goes offline because now we're spending all of our energy assessing the threat.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govindh Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govindh Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 387. I'm thrilled you're here to join me today. Look, there are moments when you can feel a conversation changing before you can really even explain why. Someone is angry, frustrated, someone feels dismissed, unseen, or maybe even a little threatened. And our instinct, especially as leaders, is often to do something about it, fix it, or explain it, or maybe even defend ourselves. I've certainly been there. Sometimes we think that we could ask better questions and find the solution. But what if none of those things are what that person needs first? What if the thing they need first is to feel heard? And what if the doorway into that experience is just two words? You feel. My guest today, Doug Noll, wrote what might be the shortest paper napkin wisdom I've ever received. You feel. That's it. And when you listen to this conversation, you may begin to notice just how much is contained inside those 7 letters. Doug spent more than 20 years as a successful commercial trial lawyer. He knew how to argue. He knew how to prepare, and he knew how to win. He also trained in a very aggressive martial art. And then one of his teachers introduced him to a completely different kind of understanding, a different sense of power. The softer you are, the stronger you are. And the more willing you are to let yourself be seen, the more powerful you can become. That idea eventually helped Doug lead his way out of the courtroom and into peacemaking. He went on to teach people serving life and long-term sentences in maximum security prisons exactly how to become mediators and peacemakers. People who had spent much of their lives learning that violence was the language of power discovered another language with Doug's help. And as Doug carried those lessons from prison yards into families, founder-led businesses, leadership teams, and boardrooms, things started to find different connections. There's a connection here for you with something I talk about often in magnetic leadership: confidence, congruence, calm, and contribution. Because the calmest person in the room has access to choices no one else in the room may have. And perhaps leadership changes when we stop asking only, how do I get this person to better understand me, and start noticing something else. Do they feel safe? Do they trust me? Do they feel like they matter? You may already know where this shows up in your life. A conversation with a staff member, a team member, a partner, a child, or a spouse, someone you care about who seems impossible to reach. And maybe as you listen, you can allow yourself to wonder what might just change if your first responsibility wasn't to solve what they were feeling, but to hear it. This is Doug Noll. Let's dive in. Doug Noll, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thanks. And you know what I want to say to everybody who's listening before you do anything else? Give this podcast 5 stars right now on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening from. This is an amazing podcast. It really needs to get out there. People need to hear it. So please do that right now. 5 stars. No screwing
That's very, very kind of you, Doug. I appreciate that. I'll happy to always get that plug right off the top.
Absolutely.
So you shared a really fantastic, and I think I said this. I think it might be the shortest paper napkin I've ever received, and I'm going to tell you something about that a little bit later on. I'm going to maybe there'll be time for story time a little bit later. But what's you shared was you feel. And then there's a ... But why did you share that with me?
Because those two words, when deployed properly, are the most transformative words a human being can speak to another human being. I discovered this in 2005. The brain science came out in 2007, and I field tested it for 10 years in maximum security prisons, training lifers and long-term inmates how to stop prison violence. Foundationally using these two words, learning a lot of other skills too, as we train them up to be mediators and peacemakers. But when you say something like, you feel angry, you're frustrated, you don't feel appreciated, you feel unsupported, you don't feel heard, and you literally label what somebody is feeling directly, not with I statements, not with passive voice, not with it seems like you're angry or are you angry? No, none of that works. When you say you feel, you are creating a physiological effect in the speaker's brain. You are inhibiting the center of the brain associated with negative emotion, and you are activating the part of the prefrontal cortex responsible for emotional self-awareness and emotional self-regulation. It is a profound, measurable physiological effect on the human brain, and every human brain reacts exactly the same way. 2 words, you feel.
Okay. I have so much to ask you. First of all, somewhere out there right now, someone's listening to this, and I believe the best ideas are simple enough to express on a napkin. That's the story, right?
Right.
And if you don't understand it simply, and you can't express it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And you've whittled this down to 7 letters.
That's right.
So let's talk about this, because somewhere out there somebody's saying bullshit. Somebody out there is saying
very often that I get
somebody saying I'm not good at reading other people, because they're going to make it about the other person, but it's really about them. I'm not good at reading other people, and I always get emotion wrong. So I'm going to say someone's happy when they're sad, someone's sad when they're happy, blah, blah, blah.
Yep. The 3 most common objections are, number 1, what if I get it wrong? Number 2, I'm going to look really stupid and rude and patronizing if I tell somebody what they're feeling. If somebody told me what I'm feeling, I'd punch them out. Number 3, I'm going to get a ton of pushback on this. Somebody's going to tell me not to do this anymore because people hate that. Those are the 3 most common objections. In fact, they're the only 3 objections I get. They're all wrong. There is absolutely no evidence in the 20 years I've been teaching this to tens of thousands of people, including people serving life sentences in maximum security prisons, that if you mislabel the emotion, that you will get pushback or get somebody angry. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. When you name what somebody feels and you're not quite right, all they're going to do is correct you. So, for example, you might say, you're angry. And they're going to say, I'm not angry. I'm frustrated. Oh, you're frustrated. Yeah. And you feel completely disrespected. Yeah. And nobody's listening to you. Yeah. And you feel all alone in this. Yeah. So that's how that works every single time. People are afraid to name emotions because we're trained culturally that emotions are evil. Emotions are sinful. Emotions make us weak. Emotions are feminine in a masculinized society. Emotions allow us to be exploited. And we're trained in this from the time we're 2 years old, 3 years old. I mean, remember when you were young and you were out running around 3 years old, you fall, skin your knee, it starts to bleed a little bit, and you start to cry? And what are you told? Stop crying. Be a big boy. Big boys don't cry. Rub dirt in it. It doesn't hurt. Oh, it doesn't hurt. And we are told this as children from the moment we can start walking around. And it's carried from generation to generation. It's the most insidious and pervasive form of child abuse that exists because it destroys the emotional brain. The other problem is that we're taught that what makes human beings human is rationality. And this teaching goes back 3,000 years. The truth of the matter is there's no such thing as rationality. You can't even get a good definition of rationality. We are emotional beings. Every decision we make
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Every behavior we engage in is emotional. And yet, our culture tells us exactly the opposite. So that's why there's all this fear around telling somebody what they feel. The other point you made was that I can't read emotions. Yes, you can. Your brain is hardwired for this. Mm-hmm. You just haven't taken the time to take what you already have and develop it. Here's the thing. We've only been talking vocabulary, speaking with language for 30,000 years as a species. And that occurred because of two gene mutations that occurred about 230,000 years ago. Before that, we've been on this planet in one form or another for 2 million years. How did hominids communicate with each other? How did they form clans and families? They did it through emotion, emotional communication. Body language, gestures, facial expressions, grunts, tonality, vocality, but not words. Our brains are hardwired to efficiently and quickly read the emotional state of another person. We just have to let ourselves do it. And it becomes effortless. Once you learn, it becomes effortless and easy.
Okay, so that's a compelling argument for giving it a shot, right? I mean, that's a pretty compelling argument. We've been doing it for 2 million years. It's in there, and we just need to remember how to do it, right? That's and I think that there's a whole bunch of society mumbo-jumbo that sits on top of it for both men and women, right? I mean, because you did identify that it's a masculine thing, be a big boy, but women hear it too.
Absolutely.
Right? Women hear it too.
They get absolutely. They get invalidated just like the men do. Absolutely.
Right. So you started off as a commercial trial lawyer, and then you went to peacemaking, which it sounds like, it sounds like a rubber band snapped and you went back, you went over here. You were holding a rubber band and stretching it across two polarities and just let go of one side.
Yep.
How did you find your way? And was that part of this exploration? Was that part of the revelation that made you move?
That preceded everything.
It preceded it. Okay.
Yeah. So my story is that I grew up in Southern California. I went to Dartmouth College. I was an English lit major, came back to California, went to law school, clerked for a judge for a year, then went into private practice in 1978 in September, tried my first civil jury trial at the end of October of 1978, and for the next 22 years, I was a commercial and business complex trial lawyer. Arbitrations, court trials, jury trials, federal court, state court, bankruptcy court, you name it. Mostly all complex.
In litigation?
In litigation.
Okay.
I didn't call myself a litigator. I was a trial lawyer. I tried cases. Litigators, that was a thing back there. I'm a litigator. Sure. No, you're not. Well, you're a litigator. You do law in motion. Got it. I do trials. So what happened was that in the 80s, I picked up the martial arts and finally earned my second degree black belt around my 40th birthday. And my teacher told me to go start studying Tai Chi as a martial art. And I did. Tai Chi has two paradoxes, and these are the paradoxes that changed my life. The first one is the softer you are, the stronger you are. The more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. In the beginning, I didn't get it, but I continued to study Tai Chi, and that led me down some really interesting paths into energy healing and things like that. But I was standing in a courtroom a couple of years later, cross-examining somebody, and the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? And after that trial, I had a whitewater trip planned up in Idaho and spent 10 days on the main salmon in my wrap thinking about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer. And I could only count 5 people in 20 years. And I told myself, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want to go another 20 or 30 years and only serve 5 or 10 or 15 people. That's not who I am. So I didn't know what I was going to do, but when I came back home, I live in Central California in the Sierra Nevada. I was driving down out of the mountains to my office, and I heard what turned out to be the only public service announcement on our local public radio station for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies. So I enrolled. And for 3 years, I was a full-time graduate student, a three-quarters-time law professor, and a full-time trial lawyer. When I finished my master's degree,
so that adds up to more than one.
It was a pretty busy right? It was a pretty busy 3 years. Pretty insane. My partners and I couldn't come to agreement on what was going to happen. One of the managing partner gave me an ultimatum on a Friday. I walked in on Monday and I said I quit. And I walked away from $10 million and opened up my own peacemaking and mediation practice on November 1st, 2000, and never looked back. So that's how it started. But the evolution continued, because it wasn't until 2005 that I discovered how important it was naming emotions. You feel came much later. But I was in a difficult mediation. I talk about it in my TEDx talk that people can find. And I discovered that when you name emotions...
So the TEDx, just before we move on, the TEDx is called Listen Someone Into Existence. It's going to be in the show notes.
Yeah. I gave that TEDx in April in North Carolina. I discovered the power of naming emotions. And then 2 years later, the brain science explained what I had been observing with a brain scanning study out of Matthew Lieberman's lab. And that's when I began to teach it and develop it. And then I was getting a lot of pushback and skepticism, the same kinds of questions you asked at the top of the show. And I had the opportunity with my colleague Laurel Coffer to begin training women serving life and long-term prison sentences in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, how to become peacemakers and mediators. And the very first skill we taught them was how to listen to emotions. And what we saw was unbelievable in terms of the transformation. I tell one of the stories in the TED Talk. That was the first really profound story coming out of the prison project. And for the next 10 years, that's what I did. We worked in maximum security prisons here in California and then in Connecticut, training people serving life and long-term sentences how to become peacemakers. Today, the organization Prison of Peace is international. We had no idea how this thing would go. But you train these people and watch them transform as human beings and watch them de-escalate massively violent situations like stopping gang riots on the yard using these skills, and thousands and thousands of tiny little arguments that could erupt into violence all stopped because our students knew what to do. And we weren't teaching lightweights here. One of my best students was the founder of the Aryan Brotherhood white supremacist gang. And he became one of the most powerful mediators I've ever met using these skills. In fact, he ended up being moved around from prison to prison to mediate gang stuff. Pretty interesting.
That's very interesting. Okay, I need to stop you because you've taken us on this incredible journey, and I'd like to just sort of dive into some of those pieces, Doug.
Sure.
First of all, your martial arts training that moved you to this realization: the softer you are, the stronger you are,
right?
And the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. What do you think was happening for you that your sensei sensed in you that you needed this lesson? What was happening for you in that moment?
It was pretty obvious. I was a second-degree black belt in a northern Chinese animal style. You know, one of the things we used to say is we break bones, not boards. It was a street fighting style, extremely vicious. And he saw in me the fact that I now could take care of myself. My 5-on-1 fight was a fair fight for me. And that I also had the arrogance of the trial lawyer. And that I really needed balance in my life because...
So you had the aggression side figured out.
I had the aggression side way figured out. And he saw that I needed the balance. So he said, go study Tai Chi.
So what was happening for you up until that point in your life that you saw that much aggression? What were you driving toward or moving away from that brought you to that place that you felt you needed those tools?
Fall is here, which means it's time to plan ahead and make sure your brand is showing up in ways that have an impact. That's where 4imprint comes in. 4imprint have promotional products that work as hard as you do. Durable, useful, and designed to make a lasting impression. Think quality apparel your team will wear again and again, including popular and exclusive brands. Drinkware that's enjoyed again and again. Bags, notebooks, tools, and tech items that don't just look good, but actually get used. With thousands of customizable options, 4imprint makes it easy to find what fits your brand and your budget. You'll get expert help, free samples, and their 360-degree guarantee means you can be 4imprint certain your order shows up just right, right on time. Whether you're gearing up for fall events or simply planning ahead for the season, 4imprint helps your brand show up, stay useful, and make connections that last. Explore the possibilities at 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain.
I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. All right, well, there's a little bit more to the backstory. I was born with some very severe physical disabilities. Partially blind, 2 club feet, partially deaf, bad teeth, left-handed. And my club feet were corrected by surgery. I couldn't really walk until I was about 3.5 years old, 4 years old, so developmentally I was way behind everybody. My eyes kept me back in school as a child until the 4th grade, when a nurse finally tested me and found out that my vision was 2400. And so I got glasses, but they were big, thick Coke bottle glasses in black plastic in the 1950s, which in those days, that was a killer socially. So I wasn't coordinated, I wasn't athletic, I had these thick glasses, and I was super smart. Too smart for my own good. And so I developed arrogance and as a mechanism for self-protection, and it started really young. And I was smart enough to get into Dartmouth College, and I covered up all of my insecurities with all of this arrogance. And that I had the perfect personality trait for being a successful trial lawyer. As it turns out. And that's what happened. I just became a trial lawyer because my personality, these maladaptive things that I developed to protect myself from my own deep insecurities, led me into trial law. And trial law just fed on it. Super competitive. Right. And then the way I got into the market,
it's a whole, like you had this whole life of beating the odds.
Yeah.
And betting on yourself.
Yeah.
And you turned that into a profession.
Yeah.
And you turned it into a hobby. And your sensei felt that.
That's right.
What a gift.
Right. And the truth of the matter was, he was absolutely right. I was living 2 lives. There was the trial lawyer side of me, which, was intellectually very stimulating, and, I was very good at what I did. I lost very few trials and won almost everything, only because I out-prepared everybody. But there was another part of me that really wanted to serve. So I was like living these 2 different lives, and I think
How did you handle that conflict at that time? There must
Not
have
well.
been. Yeah. So, what did that look like? Because right now somebody out there is listening, and here's the thing: you were a partner in a firm. Your partnership to you was worth $10 million, right? So you were very successful at what you had built, but inside, so you had receipts for the arrogance. You had receipts.
Oh, yeah.
I made bills.
Made a lot of money. Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't fitting you anymore. You came to a place where that mask wasn't fitting you anymore, and you had to put it down. And I think right now somebody is looking at their mask in their hand, and they're saying, "I got to put this down." But man, it pays the bills. It's got receipts. How did you get there?
I did everything I told my clients not to do. No business plan, no savings account, no idea of where I was going. I just knew that I could not do what I was doing anymore. It would kill me.
Right.
And it killed my marriage. And so I just knew that I had...
Did that happen before?
It happened right after.
right after, yeah.
Yeah, but it had been building. You can't be a trial lawyering and personal relationships don't work very well. Some people can manage it, but there's a huge divorce rate and suicide rate in the profession. So I just knew I couldn't do it anymore, and I didn't care. I'd had the big house, I'd had the big car, I'd had all the trappings of success, professional success, and it meant nothing to me. And in my master's degree work, first of all, it was just mind-blowingly amazing what I learned, and I just really felt called to it. And I didn't know how it was going to shake out. I didn't know how my life would be. I just knew that what I was studying and what I was learning resonated very deeply with me. And I wanted to find ways to serve people, help them through the most difficult times of their life, and do it in a way that was collaborative and constructive and positive, rather than tearing people apart, which is what litigation is all about.
Right.
And that was what my calling was. And I just followed it. Yes, it was an act of recklessness, I think, financial recklessness. I don't make nearly the money today that I made then, but I don't need to. I don't like, I mean, you learn when you find your true passion in life that money doesn't mean anything. It's the big house, all that stuff, it's meaningless. It just, and it's hard to understand when you're younger. It was hard for me to understand. I didn't get it. But then you do.
Is this, I think the work you're doing is amazing, and I'm going to catch up to modern time in a second, but I'm going to go back even further for a second. So one of my core beliefs is that we are our best in the world, our most expansive, exponential version of ourselves when we are for ourselves, what we are for others, what we need most ourselves.
Sorry.
So the 5-year-old or however year old version of Doug with the Coke bottle glasses and poor dexterity and brilliant mind, is this, if someone came up to that Doug and really connected on that emotional level, how would that have felt? Is that what you needed?
Yeah. My parents loved me. I grew up in affluence and white privilege, but they gave me no emotional support. Love was conditioned on performance. And
so you performed.
So I performed. And it's a very hard way to grow up, and a lot of people grow up that way, especially in my generation. So what I was looking for was connection, because there was none. And when I didn't get connection, I can remember exactly the day that it happened. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I just said, screw it. I can't trust anybody. I'm going to do this by myself, and to heck with everybody else. And I just went inside and became isolated, and that's when the arrogance started, because there was just nobody there to support me.
Right.
And it hurt. My parents and I talked about this quite a bit in later years before they passed, and they said, we didn't know what to do with you. And we knew you were hurting, but we had no clue what to do with you. And my other brothers, I was the oldest of 4, my other brothers were all pretty normal. So it was a lot easier to raise them than it was to raise me. Sure.
Yeah, I think as parents, we struggle for that guidebook, and the guidebook's in front of us. And I think this is the powerful sort of like full circle moment where we can come back a little bit to your theory, right? So you walk away, and I actually want to change. I wonder if we can reframe that for the purpose of this discussion, that you invested $10 million in Prison of Peace because you walked away from $10 million. You put $10 million up unconsciously, perhaps, and moved towards this other life. And
that was I left the firm in 2000, and Prison of Peace started 10 years later. I guess you could say somehow maybe I invested $10 million in a completely different way of looking at the world that prepared me to begin Prison of Peace with Laurel Coffer 10 years later.
Incredible. So let's talk about that. Prison of Peace, the work you do. So what is a peacemaker? Let's talk about that. I think
good question.
I think I looked it up because I wanted to connect with the meaning of what you were saying. But you heard it on the radio. You heard, hey, get a master's in peacemaking, and went, that's for me.
Well, at least, I'm not sure it said that's for me, but it said, well, that sounds interesting. I'm going to go check that out.
Okay. So how did you feel about it then? What came up for you? Why did you dive in? What connected you to it, and what does it mean?
Well, let's start with what it means. Peacemaking is fraught with baggage, and I recognize that. It's got religious baggage. It's got violent baggage, the quote peacemaker. It's a word that can be smarmy.
It can be righteous, too. It can sound like holier than thou, right?
That's right. And the way but I still could not find any way to describe what it was that I was aspiring to and what I do. So the definition of peace is not calm. Peace is being able to walk into any situation, no matter how noisy, no matter how violent, no matter how difficult, and maintain calm inside.
Ready to jumpstart your homeschool year? The Good and the Beautiful has everything you need to get started. Free printable schedules, free full math and language arts courses, free engaging learning apps, and so much more. Our goal is to make homeschooling simple and joyful for you and your children. Check out our site to find everything you need to bring home a love of learning. Visit goodandbeautiful.com/free to get started today.
And that's what I teach people, how to walk into difficult environments, whether it's in your marriage or in your work, children, doesn't matter. How to maintain your own calm, and then through your presence and through the word you feel, create calm in the room around you. That's peacemaking at its essence. And then you can get into mediation. Mediation can be peacemaking. It doesn't necessarily always mean peacemaking, but mediation is facilitated negotiation. And mediation can take on all kinds of different forms and involve all kinds of different types of disputes and conflicts. And it may involve peacemaking and it might not. So mediation and peacemaking are close together in concept, but not necessarily the same. So, for example, I do a lot of work in non-litigated disputes, family business conflicts, founder-led companies, PE-backed companies, where their human dynamics are interfering with strategic execution. That's more peacemaking work. I don't call it that because most people don't like the word. But really what I'm coming in and helping people calm down, be able to talk to each other, begin to trust each other again, create safety, and allow people to collaborate because their nervous systems are no longer dysregulated. Because it all comes down to biophysiology, the physiology of the central nervous system. And so at its most basic level, peacemaking is really regulating nervous systems.
Okay. So I love that. One of the things that I talk a lot about is the magnetic leadership framework having 4 pillars. Mm-hmm. And the 4 pillars are confidence, congruence, calm, and contribution. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about the way you speak about it is it's very similar to the way I speak about the framework. Particularly, confidence is your ability to be able to speak your truth cleanly without any charge. And calm is where power comes from. The calmest person in the room is always the most powerful.
Right.
And what it feels like you're doing is helping people understand how to regulate others and themselves.
That's correct.
In this powerful framework.
That's correct. That's
around
exactly
your work, right?
That's exactly right. That's an excellent way to describe it.
In that situation that you talked about, right? When you talk about breaking up prison violence, the calm person that comes in as the most powerful person.
That's right.
In the room, and you've given them the agency to find that power.
That's right.
Like that, right?
That's right. All of my clients, everybody learns the skill, and you learn how to regulate your own system so that you don't get triggered. And once you've learned that, and then you've learned how to regulate another nervous system, how to calm an angry person in 90 seconds or less, basically helping people regulate their own dysregulated systems, that gives you a confidence that allows you to walk into any situation, no matter how intense, and know exactly what to say, and know exactly what's going to happen, and to be able to identify exactly what's going on without any
Isn't it
confusion or
interesting
chaos.
that you're the way you just described that is you used to do that same thing through force and pressure,
Right.
either in trial situations or physical pressure, 5 versus 1, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're doing it in the complete opposite direction.
Soft to be strong, and vulnerable to be powerful.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. What happens to these men and women in these maximum security, violent environments when they learn how to be soft and powerful, when they learn how to be vulnerable and powerful? What happens to them?
They completely change as human beings.
Right? Because you've changed their world order.
That's right.
They've leared that pressure is what makes you powerful the whole way through.
They've
learned
violence
to
is their
defend
only
themselves
language.
with the same mask
Yep.
that you had, right?
Violence is the only way to be. And believe me, when you listen to their origin stories and the families they grew up in, I coined a phrase. I said, murderers are not born, they're bred. And boy, when you hear some of the stories of what these people went through, anybody that went through that would be where they are. But here's the thing that was so remarkable. When we began to show them these skills and they started testing them on the yard and saw that they worked, they became avid peacemakers and mediators. Most people, I never met anybody, of all the thousands of people that I met in prison, I never met one that liked violence. Not one.
Not one.
It was the only language they knew. And when we taught them a language that didn't require violence, they flocked to it like ducks to water and became powerful peacemakers, and still are. We've had over 800 of our students who are serving life sentences of one kind or another released on parole in California. Not one of them has reoffended.
Not one.
Not one.
So you've touched more than 5 people in this last 20 years, Doug.
A lot of people. When you think of all the inmates that have been trained by either Laurel and myself directly or through all of our trainers, and then you think of their extended families, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people.
Right. You said train more than 3,000 inmates as peacemakers. What's possible for us as humans if we can take the most violent people and teach them how to turn their strength into soft, vulnerable strength instead of the force-related, violent strength, the only language they knew? Mm-hmm. What happens to leaders or other people who are similarly using force the way you did,
right,
to assert themselves in situations? What do you see happen there? Well,
there's massive transformations that occur not only in the individuals that deploy these skills, but in the effect of the people around them.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. You can use command and control. That's the old leadership authority from generations past, and some people still use it because that's what they grew up with, and that's what they learned. And we know from people like Amy Edmondson at Harvard that psychological safety is one of the primary drivers of team success. and command and control does not lead to psychological safety. It goes in the opposite direction. It triggers the threat status in the team members' minds, and their prefrontal cortex shuts down. They can no longer be effective. And leaders pull out their hair figuratively, trying to figure out, how do I get my team to perform? But the problem is the leader has never been taught the skill set necessary to make people feel safe. And when our brains are constantly asking three questions: am I safe? Do I trust you? Do I matter to you? Every human being is asking that question every microsecond, because we are constantly scanning for threats in the environment. This is our inheritance from millions of years of evolution. When the answer is no to any of those questions, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, or it becomes inaccessible, because now we're spending all of our energy assessing the threat. And the other thing that people don't recognize is a social threat is perceived by the brain exactly as if a saber-toothed tiger were leaping at them. The brain cannot distinguish between a social threat and a physical threat. Only the prefrontal cortex can do that. And if the prefrontal cortex is offline, because once the hypothalamus pituitary axis is activated and cortisol is flooding through us, we can no longer think, then we're going to treat that insult, that disrespect, that snide comment, that commanding do this or else threat as a saber-toothed tiger leaping at us. And our bodies are going to react just like that. The leader that learns not to do that, the leader that learns leadership empathy, how to engage in nervous system leadership, stops all of that from happening. And what happens is people build trust, they feel safe, they become collaborative, they become creative, they become motivated, you become a leader that everyone wants to follow, and you get your best out of your people. And that can't do anything but help the bottom line.
So remind me again, why didn't you just rent a truck and move yourself?
Well, been there, done that. Just once. Wound up with a squashed couch, a stiff neck, and my brother ghosting me for 6 months.
I get it. I'm staring at a mountain of boxes and suddenly realize managing this move is my entire life.
That's why we moved with Mayflower. They handled everything. The packing, loading, timing. No guessing, no chaos, no trips to the chiropractor.
But isn't hiring a mover kind of pricey?
Not when you factor in truck rental, gas, time off work, and your stuff getting messed up. With Mayflower, we had a move coordinator and actual professionals. I slept the night before moving day.
Sleeping before a move? Sounds very grown up.
Right? It felt like, okay, we've got this.
So doing it yourself may be simple in theory, but Mayflower is calmer in reality. Is that it?
Exactly.
Moving? Trust the people who've been doing it for generations, every step of the way. Get a free quote at mayflower.com.
So it feels like a really great and effective strategy one-on-one. But can it be used in the front of the room?
Absolutely.
With a number of people?
Absolutely.
How could a leader, talk me through how somebody could start living in a more connected way tomorrow, in a more peaceful mediation way tomorrow.
I can explain it, but this takes some training. I'm not saying that this is something, it takes about as much work as it takes to learn how to ride a bicycle. So not a lot, but it takes training.
But
enough. It's not something you can just read a book or listen to us talking and go do it. But the trained leader walks into a team meeting, and I don't care what the level is, with C level or 5 levels below, it doesn't matter. The first thing, in any important meeting where there's going to be an important discussion, the first thing that team leader has to do is assess, where are the nervous systems in this room? Who's dysregulated? And you can learn how to do that. And you can learn how to read a room really quickly and figure out what the problems are. And you have a couple of different choices on how to handle dysregulation. For example, somebody's checked out, somebody's bored, somebody looks withdrawn or defensive, somebody looks angry. And you could have all of these emotions going on in the room at the same time. Totally dysregulated room. There's toxicity going on, gossiping, backstabbing, politics, all that crap. So a couple of different techniques. One skill is to simply do a simple check-in. We taught this to our students in prison. Heart, head, and home. So you go around the room and you ask everybody just for a moment, what's going on in your head, what's going on in your heart, what's going on at home. 90 seconds. And then as people begin to talk, you listen for the emotional experience that's underneath what they're talking, and you say, you feel. You feel overwhelmed right now in your head. And in your heart, you're feeling anxious and scared. And at home, you're feeling love and connection. And you just say that to every single person in the room, so they all feel heard. And that will settle everybody right there. Mm. So, and that takes, you got 10 people in the room, 90 seconds, takes you 900 seconds, 5 minutes to do that? Once you have people, their nervous system settled, guess what happens? They get access to their prefrontal cortex. They can start to think. And they're not sitting there listening and defending and withdrawing and not engaging. They'll become totally engaged with you. And so that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do.
So how does it, let's just pause for a second. So let's say I were to do this once with my team. Is that the kind of thing that I can do next month with my team too? Do people get bored of it? People get predictive of it? Does it change its effectiveness when we do it more often?
The biggest need we all have as human beings is to be heard and to be validated. So you're listening somebody into existence when you do this, and it is a continuous need. That hunger is never filled. So by doing this on a consistent basis where people feel like they're really being heard by you and really being listened to, they're being listened into existence, over a period of time, that's what creates the change. So it's just not a one-off. It's a practice.
So how is this different if somebody's listening and saying, oh, I acknowledge my team. I connect with them. I do that. And I've got all these scripts that I follow. We ask one interesting question before we begin our meetings, and everybody talks about it, and we're all connected.
No, wrong. First of all, most people don't know how to ask questions that connect. They ask questions that disconnect. So, for example, Covey talked about this in his book, 7 Habits. Go read The Fifth Habit. I went back, I read Covey when it first came out in the 80s, and but then I went back and read The Fifth Habit a couple of months ago, and I really reread it with my current knowledge, and I said, this guy was a friggin' genius. He just didn't know it, and he didn't know what he was teaching. And so the fifth habit, which is the most important habit of them all, which is listening.
He declares that, yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't really know what he was doing. And when I looked at it, I said, oh, he's saying you feel without saying you feel. And he did not have the brain science to explain why it worked. But he talks about the questions that people typically ask. They ask to evaluate, they ask to probe, they ask to advise, and they ask to interpret. So we are not trained in how to ask the right questions, because all of those questions are me-centered. They're on my agenda. And so when a leader said, well, I connect with my people, I asked this question. No, you're on an agenda. You're trying to manage these people. They can sense that you're trying to manage them. You're doing some little technique you learn that's on top of your leadership operating system, which is confidence, control, and competence, which is what you're trying to project. So it's all about you. That's why it doesn't work. You have to change your presence. You have to use a you feel statement. And you have to be present with it in the moment. You can't be distracted. That's the difference. That's the mind shift.
Were you always, thinking back to 5-year-old Doug Noll, 6-year-old Doug Noll, were you always present for what people were saying? You have a very powerful. You're listening. If you're just listening to this podcast and not watching, I'd recommend watching, because Doug is very present all the way through. He's a very connected listener. You're a very connected listener, so I can feel that. It's kind of your whole thing,
right?
But it's not. Most people who come onto a podcast have some agenda, and I'm not saying you don't. You obviously do. However, you're a powerful listener. You're powerfully present. Have you always been that, or was that something you honed through this practice?
This is an evolution, and I'm still evolving.
Right.
But that's why I write books and write articles and my Substack. I mean, I do a lot of content generation because it helps me inform my thinking and evolve as a human being. No, it's an evolutionary process that anybody can go through. Certainly, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You just have to have the desire to do it. And, I had a lot of motivating factors that pushed me onto the path. So, I mean, for example, when I divorced my first wife, I said, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to set myself up for failure in a relationship again. And I will do whatever it takes to figure out how to do a relationship the right way. I have a great marriage now. I've been married to this woman for 20 years, and it's phenomenal. I haven't always been successful, but it's good.
Yeah.
So this is a skill, and it takes some training to get it down. Not a lot, 8 weeks usually, 8 to 10 weeks. Most people can master this, and then it takes continual practice. It's a perishable skill. If you don't work with it, you lose it. But the beauty of it is that once you start doing it, it becomes so self-affirming because you see the results immediately, and people are thanking you for listening to them, for validating them. The gratitude is just unbelievable. And so if that makes you feel good, I want to keep doing this because it makes me feel good. And I'm seeing the performance in the people that I'm working with.
Right. I think you speaking of gratitude brings me to this place where we're going to shout out an old napkin we got many, many years ago from a great friend of the show. His name was John Rulin, and he wrote on a napkin, what you appreciate appreciates. And when you appreciate someone, they appreciate and value. And I think
that's right.
That is a very aligned sentiment to who you are and what you teach and what you've been doing in prisons and boardrooms alike. And suddenly he passed away recently, unexpectedly. And ever since that day, we've been paying forward his gift to us by asking our guests to bring some appreciation to someone. Who would you like to shout out today?
Well, I want to shout out my wife, Leah. She is a brilliant spiritual teacher, ascended master, who has helped me grow in ways that I could never imagine. And I am just deeply grateful for every moment of our lives together. It's been amazing.
You feel complete?
I do. I feel complete, and also I feel expectant. Something is opening in front of me. I don't know what it is yet, but we'll see.
But you're here for it.
I'm here for it.
Well, thank you for being here for this.
You're welcome.
Maybe there is someone in your life right now who has been trying to tell you something. Maybe they've been saying it loudly or quietly, and maybe they've just stopped saying it altogether. And as you think about that person, you might begin to notice how quickly most of us move towards solving. We explain, we reassure, we defend, offer advice, try to make the feeling go away. And Doug gave us another possibility today. You feel. 2 words that ask us to stay with another person long enough to notice what is actually happening for them. And I keep on coming back to the arc of Doug's own life, a trial lawyer who became extraordinarily skilled at winning, a martial artist who learned how to protect himself through force, a young boy who learned to perform, achieve, and become fiercely independent because connection did not always feel available to him. And then eventually a man who discovered another kind of strength. The softer you are, the stronger you are. Doug didn't lose the strength he had developed. He changed his relationship with it, and perhaps that's worth sitting with, because some of the qualities that brought us here were exactly what we needed. Drive, the ability to push, the willingness to take a hit, the instinct to take control when everything around us felt uncertain. Those qualities may have served us incredibly well. And there's a moment where strength becomes something else, when pushing becomes presence, when controlling becomes listening, when having the answer becomes being willing to hear what was underneath the question. And that's really what struck me about what Doug's work with people serving life sentences in prisons is all about. People who had learned that violence was the language of strength discovered that there was another language available to them. And when they experienced that that language was working, they chose it. So think about that. If people living inside some of the hardest environments imaginable can learn another relationship with power, perhaps there are places in our own lives where we can do that too. A team meeting, a difficult conversation, a disagreement at home. Maybe a moment when somebody says something that immediately activates something inside of us. There may be just this tiny opening here. Before the answer, before the offense, before the defense, we can decide what the other person should do next. Sure, that may have worked, but maybe we could listen and notice and perhaps simply begin with the words you feel and then name their feeling. Doug, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the work you've done in prisons and boardrooms and families and organizations. And thank you for giving us what may have been the smallest napkin we have ever had on Paper Napkin Wisdom, while somehow giving us something enormous to feel, experience, and think about. And everyone listening, maybe there's one conversation waiting for you, something you don't have to fix and something you don't have to win, but just one that you can find yourself inside where the other person may finally realize that you heard them. Until next time, keep thinking big, starting small, and sharing your wisdom with the hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'll see you next time. I believe in you. Make it a great day.
Tired of your car insurance rate going up, even with a clean driving record? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/Libsyn today. That's jerry.ai/LIBSYN.
A text says, "You're on my mind." A bouquet from 1-800-Flowers says, "You're my everything." Heartfelt moments belong in the real world, not just your phone. For 50 years, 1-800-Flowers has helped millions of people make memories that'll last a lifetime with gifts they'll cherish forever. Their expertly curated arrangements and gift baskets ship nationwide with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't wait for the next big moment. Make it when you visit 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.